Kylie, it's great to have you with me today. And we were just talking about how it's been some time since we had a quick discussion of, connecting with each other. I don't remember exactly what happened, but here we are today. And you're with me all the way from Australia. I'm here in Pennsylvania in the US. And we were able to connect a while ago and we had a great conversation. You had so much to share about your journey. And I don't know where we're going to go with this conversation, but I'm excited for you to open up and share whatever it is that's going to touch and reach out to one person so they know they're not alone. So Kylie, let's just start off with like you just share who you are today, what you're most passionate about.
Yeah, so John, thanks so much. And I was just, we were just talking before we jumped on air. It has been a little minute, but what I do remember is I came away from the conversation energized. I came away feeling really positive. And I think so sometimes it's not about how frequently you connect, it's about the quality of the conversation. So I'm so excited to be back. So thank you so much for having me. A little bit about me. So I live in Brisbane, Australia, and I we connected through a community that we're both part of. And my journey has probably been, like most people's, pretty non-linear. I grew up thinking that I was going to be an educator, which I did do. But when I first started, I had this idea of being a music teacher. I soon learned that you need musical talent to be a musical teacher. That's always pretty helpful. In the 90s in Australia, I think most young people wanted to grow up to be a HPE teacher, a physical education teacher. So I had that dream as well. But what I ended up doing is I ended up going into some work experience and I worked with young people that had had really significant issues, disabilities, trauma background. And I came away going, oh my goodness, this is where I need to be. So the course of my life has always been around empowering other people through some people have been through really unfortunate circumstances of own, not of their own doing. And, wanting to empower and create a better life for people and provide opportunities for people to learn skills. So I went into education. I did what we were raised to do was you grow up, you get a job, you get a home, you have the family, you do all of those things. And then, my pathway kind of led in a different direction because my marriage didn't last. I had to sell my house, I had to do all these things. But the one thing I did have was this government job. And then over the course of navigating a few things, I ended up escaping domestic and family violence. And that was a really horrific wake up call for me about what I had been settling for and what I had been accepting that was no longer aligning to who I was becoming. And so this kind of was this, there was a few rumblings along the way, but this is one of the very big pieces that started to open up and go, I wonder what would happen if I was more consciously living my life than unconsciously existing in it, right? So I started on that journey at that particular point, and that was pretty hard. There was lots of things that people have to navigate when you're going through that experience and going through that. But fast forward a few years, my career was going pretty well, and then in 2019, I took some time off to settle my boys into school, and I injured myself. And at the time, I was like, what's going on here? I can't afford this. I can't do this. And then what I realized is I feel like the universe had been trying to be subtle to say, hey, you're not living in alignment with the version of yourself you want to be. I've tried to be really subtle about it. You're not listening. So I'm going to sit you on your butt for a little bit of time and make you actually reflect, which I did not love, by the way. But it was definitely a starting point to go, right, well, I don't really have anything else to do. I can't work at this particular point. What am I going to do? So in 2020, I left my secured job as a single parent of three kids with solo care and started a business. And I didn't have people in my life that were business owners. I didn't have people to, have mentors and models. And so there was a lot of grit and determination in that. And one of the things that I think that was part of it for me was I started thinking about what this would look like and what did I need to continually improve my own life and put that into the areas. And so I started looking at the parts of the work that I loved and started being able to do more of that and started to remove the things in my life that were no longer serving me. And so I've continued to build on the things that I love and where I want to go. and slowly over time remove some of those things that were no longer serving me. And at some point may have, but no longer serve me now. And I think sometimes we don't give ourselves permission to let go of those things that are no longer serving us and say, thank you for that, onwards and upwards.
Yeah, so you unpacked a lot right there. We can talk about
Yeah.
everything under the sun there. Um, yeah, so let's just start with the job, right? So you decided to leave your job, and what was the reason behind that again?
So I look, I loved working in I have an education background. I worked in complex behavior and I loved the kids and I loved the stuff, but I felt like I was really not achieving the things that I was capable of doing. And I felt like I could serve more people outside of the institution than in it. And it's really easy to stay stuck. But there was a Glennon Doyle is an author, and she has a book called Untamed. And in that, there was this quote that said, "My children don't need me to save them. They need to watch me save myself." And that was like a knife through the heart because what they were watching was their mum, out of fear of needing to work to pay the bills and do all that kind of stuff, continuing to show up and come home burnt out and tired and frustrated and not energized. And they certainly were not getting the best of me in that particular moment. And I'm like, well, what am I modeling for them right now? I'm modeling that you have to stay and accept less than because of what? What would that look like if I decided not to accept this? And what would I love to model for them? And then how do I create that in a way, just like I'd left an unhealthy relationship, this was no longer healthy for me. What would that look like to transition from this where I am now to where I want to be?
Yeah, I like that. I like that quote you had, and I like how you are showing up for your kids in a different way, right? Um, but there's that thing there. There's that you taking that big leap of you don't know what's gonna happen, right? And so I'm sure there was fear going on,
Oh,
yeah, and I don't know, maybe you prepared yourself a little bit, like you had a nest egg or something like that. I have no idea. So I'm curious to see what was that like for you to just go, I'm done, I'm quitting my job, I'm doing this. What did that kind of look like?
yeah. So there are a few parts to that. No, I did not have the nest egg. I didn't have any other financial support other than what I was bringing in. Um, but what I did have, so I'm not, Tony Robbins has burned the boats. I certainly am not comfortable with that. So there was some planning that went into it. So for me, it was around did I actually know my numbers? What did I actually think I needed to earn versus what did I actually need to earn? And have that hard conversation with myself. There was lots of crying and, some tissues and probably some snot at some point where, having the hard conversation with myself about what was I spending my money on? Where was it going? And this, I grew up in a scarcity model of the fact that money was never talked about in a positive frame in our house. Money was always hard to come by. We always had to work really hard. We had to save really hard. We didn't have abundance of money. It was not language that we had. So I had this narrative, this story around money, and a lot of it was around lack. And when I actually did the numbers, I realized that what I needed to earn to be able to cover my bills short term was less or I could manage it. And then I converted it to what was my hourly rate that I was going to charge for this business and how many hours did that equate to? And then I slowly built up. And once I had secured that many hours, I was able to say, well, I'm going to have my own back to continue to grow this. My backup plan was I was in a job where if I left it, chances are I would be able to reapply and be reaccepted into a role somewhere. So it wasn't completely burning the boats. But did I want to go back? No. Did my ego play a little bit of part in that going, I don't really want to walk back with my tail between my legs and say, oh, yeah, I've got to come back because I didn't make this work. So there was a bit of sheer grit and determination in making that work from there. But once I did the numbers and broke it down, it wasn't as scary as I thought it had been. And whilst I didn't have mentors on the ground, I started like watching people online who were doing things that I wanted to do. And I started taking the bits of information that I liked, leaving the rest. Right. So, sometimes with models, we get stuck because we feel like we have to apply all of it. And I just went through and went, "Oh, I like that about that. How can I apply that into my life? How can I apply that into my life? How can I apply that?" And so I piecemealed it and kind of bespoked my own model, about what I needed. And then, once I had that and I started to get those runs on the board, it was a bit of a snowball effect. And once I started to not come home burnt out and fatigued, I had more energy. I was showing up as a better mum. I was happier. Guess the version of me that was showing up to work, a much happier version of me. So it kind of snowballed from there. And I get to do something I love. I get to wake up every single morning doing something that I love every single day. How great is that?
That's great. That's really great. Yeah, because I mean, I lost my job, uh, which about 5 years ago would have been a 20-year career, right? And so it just makes you wonder. There is no job security, so you might as well do something that you love for the rest of your life if you can, right? And so I gotta ask, are you working less now? Even what I mean, and you're just as happy and you're content with everything you got?
Yeah, so I work differently now. So I work from an education background. So I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I was doing stuff from 5 till 6. The kids would get up 6 till 7. We're out the door. Then I was at work from 7 till 6. And then I'd come home and do dinner and sport and that was till that time. And then I would still be doing stuff at night time. So I was probably working 60, 70 hour weeks. And now I am working less hours, but the quality of the work that I'm delivering in that time, I think is higher level because I'm much more aligned to who I am. I get to create the life. I'm a morning person, like, so it's 9 o'clock in the morning here, but I've been up for 4 hours. And because that's my best operating time, I'm not a night person. So, you know, yes. And last year, so every year my revenue has grown in business. And every year the amount of hours I have worked in delivery has lessened. So last year I was in New York, last year I was in Hawaii, last year I was doing all these things. I get to have a holiday with my kids, a proper holiday, not one where I'm working whilst I'm having a holiday, which in education that was kind of the thing. They talk about teachers getting all of these, or school people getting all these holidays. You ask any educator, more than half of that is spent actually working in preparation for what you're doing anyway. So the quality of the time that I'm spending with people is better. I'm working less in the sense that, but I'm also very lucky because I love what I do so much. When I am working, I'm not getting as fatigued or burnout as well. So 5 hours of my day now would probably equate to 15 hours of my day back then because I get to do what I love. So the quality of the output is better because the quality of the input, because I'm feeling so much better about myself. And so when we're working in our zone of genius, not only are we good at what we do, it gives us energy instead of drains our energy. So, I worked in my zone of competence for so long was I was good at this job, but after a period of time, it's really fatiguing and I was tired and I started to get resentful. So spending some more time in my zone of genius, doing what I love that gives me energy. And that's not to say I love every single task. Like I have a bookkeeper because my most least favorite task of all times is reconciling my books. Good God. It was the very first thing I could outsource as soon as I could afford it, right? But knowing that about myself means that it takes me 5 hours to do that task. It takes her 15 minutes, right? So it's gonna cost me $30, $30 to employ her to do that. I just worked out how much more hours it would take me 15 minutes of my time to earn the money to be able to pay her to do that hour of work, right? So, that's where you start to get smarter in the way that you work so that you can spend more time in your zone of genius, so that you get to show up as this version of yourself that is energized, engaged, and happy and fulfilled.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate all this. So when you said, "Hey, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna do this," right? How did you fight any fear that you might have had coming along your way?
I think the fear of my children growing up thinking they had to settle for less then, because that was what was modeled to them,
Mm,
that was actually a bigger driver than me going, "Oh my god, I'm scared out of my pants. I don't know what to do here, but I'm gonna do it anyway." So, I think we all have fear and so my fear of staying somewhere where I was unfulfilled because it was also affecting the quality of my relationships with people. I tended to attract people that were unfulfilling, or had so many dramas, they were so negative in life and they were so miserable. because they were matching my energy. So if I wanted to change the people that in my ecosystem, I had to elevate myself and attract a different level of person, right? So my greatest fear was that my children would think that they would have to accept less. And I think what I was modeling for them was exactly that. So that fear kind of drove everything else out the window. I don't mind hard work. I don't think most people mind hard work. I think we need to know. I think the problem is sometimes we don't know where to direct the energy. So the burnout comes from spending a lot of time working hard on the wrong thing. So once we get that, now my kids are like, wow, if I want to do this, my daughter, who, she's 21 now, but when she was growing up, money would just burn through her pocket, right? Just all the time. Like, it's almost like she couldn't hold it for longer than about 5 seconds. She has an incredible amount of savings now, 21, working part time at Subway because she is now creating goals for herself. She's creating plans. She's creating a future for herself that she wants to create, and so now she's got a vision to work with and she's got a greater purpose. And then she does that. I think that has come from that shift for her. Wasn't an explicit conversation around you need to save your money, but it was around if you really want to go to Hawaii or if you want to go to New York, then what do we need to do that? And so I started modeling that. And as a default, she's taken that on board. And, she wants to go to South Korea and she wants to go to Japan and we're going to Hawaii next year again. So, that came from that modeling. We know in work and in life, that modeling is one of the most powerful ways to change behavior. So what am I
Yeah.
modeling right now as a parent? If I want my kids not to scream and yell at me, what am I modeling in how I communicate with them? If I'm a yeller, what am I modeling? That this behavior is okay. In a relationship, am I modeling, hey, I'm really feeling really overwhelmed at the moment. Can we have a conversation? In business, if you've got staff, what are we modeling right now? Right? So that's one of the things I always ask people is, what am I modeling right now? Is it moving me closer to the outcome I want, or is it moving away from the outcome that I want?
Yeah, it sounds like you really worked on yourself a lot through the years.
Oh, for sure. And I think I grew up quite scared of my own shadow. And so there was a lot of limiting beliefs. There was a lot of fear. There was a lot of, in Australia, I'm not sure how prevalent it is in America, but we have a thing called tall poppy syndrome. So speaking positively about yourself was associated with bragging and who you shouldn't be talking positively about yourself. So we were very much humbled into, oh, you can't talk really, well about yourself. So I had to unlearn. So Alvin Toffler has a quote that says, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those that cannot read or write. It will be those that cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." Right. So I had a whole heap of unlearning about behaviors and things that were no longer working for me so that I could spend the time getting the information and the knowledge and relearning behaviors that were going to get me to the next level. Because that whole saying, "What got you there won't get you here," is so true.
Yeah, what would you say to somebody that is looking to make that shift, whether it's a job, a relationship, whatever that is, they need to get past what they're going through?
Yeah. So for me, I was really stuck. And I think, if people are watching this, they'll see my bookshelf. There's a bucket of books there. Not everyone loves to read. I do. Um, but I was so overwhelmed. We can't claim that there's not access to information on how to do self-improvement anymore because you only have to pick up a phone, you only have to get on social media, you only have to do a YouTube search. There's so much stuff. What I found was that there was so much, I didn't even know where to start. And how did I know what was the right thing for me right now? And so from that, I created my own model to figure out what I needed on the next steps of my journey. And that was my infinite leadership model. And so the pillars of infinite are identity. Who am I right now? And what is my identity? And that means being the author of your own story, not the character in somebody else's. And I ran an event last night and we talked about the fact that um, understanding your labels are not your identity, right? So I have a label of DV victim or DV survivor or, whatever frame you want to give that. But that's not who I am. That's not my identity. It's an experience I had and it's an accurate description of something that I went through, but it's not my identity. right? And often we get stuck. The next part is nurturing. So that emotional intelligence part and emotional agility is understanding that self-awareness about how you navigate the world emotionally, not just in your head. And how do we pivot and change and evolve that? And that comes down to, if my identity is of a victim, what emotions do I associate and carry with me as I'm navigating that? But if my identity of someone is of someone who is strong and resilient and who has learnt the wisdom out of the wounds that they've experienced, and I can take that journey and empower people, and that's my identity, then my emotional intelligence is a whole different frame. I'm now moving forward rather than staying stuck. Fearlessness is not the absence of fear, but it's actually labeling those fears accurately and actually identifying that we all have core fears. But if we operate from our motivations versus our fears, we are going to be far more successful. So sometimes the behavior that we have might look the same, but we've got to just dip below that surface and identify if we're operating from our motivation or operating from our fear. Right. And a really good example I give of that is helping another person. If you're helping for the sake of helping and quite altruistically, you just want that person to get a good outcome, that's operating from motivation. But if you're helping because you need to validate your self-worth, that you're a good person because you can contribute to that, that's operating from fear. And so, you're not going to get the same outcome if you're not operating from if you're operating from motivation versus fear, right? So we've got to understand that we are all driven by fears. I don't, you know, some of it's more conscious than others. And sometimes we've got to, again, dip below that, the iceberg under the water of what's really the fear. And sometimes what we think is the fear is not the fear, So we've got to really do that piece of work. Innovation is, about this creativity and how do we create space? I know myself, going into business, it's really get easy to get caught. We talk about um, working in the business versus on the business. And anyone, when you're hustling your little heart out, often we're stuck in the business. And how do we create space to think more visionary and get the on the business piece? And I know that the way that I operate is I'm not really good at code switching. So, if you've got 15 minutes between a client, or if you've got half an hour between a client, I am not productive to go, oh, I'm just going to spend 15 minutes doing this part of the on the business stuff. My brain does not work like that. I can't code switch that quickly. And so I need to craft out time. And so how do I innovate my day so that I've give myself or that week to say, hey, Fridays my day to work on the business, and then I'm gonna do the in the business stuff every other day, because my creativity comes, usually at inopportune moments when I'm not doing that really conscious thinking, in the shower, in the car, sitting having a cup of coffee in the morning. So how do we create space for innovation and creativity? And what does that look like for you as you're navigating your journey? Where do you do your best thinking, and how do we create space for that? Because we're all busy. Everyone says to me, "Oh, Kylie, I'm really busy." I'm like, every single one of us is super busy, but how do we know that we're busy on the right things? And how do we create space even though we're busy to do that? Because just going through the motions over and over again is not going to get us to that next level in our journey, right?
Yeah.
Then we have nobility, which is this idea of that our ego sometimes is the driver a lot of the time. So, how do we keep our ego in check? And how do we operate from service? One of the greatest things, if we're feeling stuck in life, is not to always do something for ourselves, but go and help somebody else. Often creates that space for ourselves. Influence, communication, I talk a lot about psychological safety, this idea that it's okay to speak up. And I think that, psychological safety is a frame that has become very popularized in corporate land. I don't think people do it well in corporate land, by the way, but I think it's much more commonly used as language. But what would psychological safety look like if I was creating it for myself? If I was creating a sense of belonging for myself, what would that look like and sound like and feel like? If I was creating learner safety for myself, that it's okay for me to make a mistake, what would that look like and sound like and feel like for myself? Contribution, being able to hold space for my thoughts or those that I love and care around me. And how do I challenge my ideas without beating myself up? Instead of going, "Oh, you're such an idiot because you did this," what would it look like if I did challenge my own thoughts at some point and create that for myself? So that influence part comes from creating safe spaces for brave and courageous conversations, whether that's on a podcast like we're doing now, whether it's with a friend or whether it's with a business partner, we've got to have safe spaces for brave and courageous conversations. Then we've got transformation, so bringing it all together and that, legacy piece of how do we need to um, transform, which is putting some of those pieces of the puzzle together. And I think, Brene Brown was talking about a podcast and she talks about in transformation is that if we're not breaking stuff, so things recognizing that things are need to be broken and we need to revisit and we're not really transforming, right? And then the ecosystem is who do we have in our world that is going to be our cheerleader and support. And, some people, not everyone is created equal and not everyone are the right people to have in your ecosystem. And as you evolve and grow through your identity, through your nurturing, through all of these pillars, your ecosystem is going to change as well. And that's one of the things that drew me to the community that you and I are both part of in CLA is this community's ecosystem of people that were excited and innovative and entrepreneurial. And when you came up with a crazy idea, they're like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. Let's go. Instead of, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Don't do it. We need those people in our ecosystem that are going to get excited and inspired by the ideas that we're creating, not get scared by that. Oh my God, here's Kylie again. What she come up with now? It's like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm ready for the next installment, right? And in that ecosystem, we need to do an energy audit. Who are the people, places, situations, and conversations that give us energy? And who are the people, places, situations, and conversations that drain our energy? And one of the things I love about doing podcasts is they give me energy. So, we'll do the podcast for an hour or however long, and then I am energized for the next 3 hours because they're so energizing for me to be able to share space with people that are inspiring and want to serve a greater purpose in themselves, like, right? And so I'm so grateful for the opportunity to come on and share that. But that was for me how I did that was to create this infinite pillars. And then every time I go back, then I can go revisit my identity because I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. I'm not the same person I was 3 months ago. So, this ongoing evolution means that I can keep working through those pillars and go, who am I right now? What do I need right now? What are my current fears that I'm facing? How do I keep evolving through that? Is my ecosystem aligned to what I need? Right now that this is my identity, how do I keep going back and revisiting? So, you never run out of things to do because it's an ongoing evolution.
Yeah, it is. You just said a whole bunch of great stuff. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to this again or cut it all out or something. I do like how you shared a little bit. You just mentioned identity again, and you share in the beginning there too. We tend to put ourselves in that situation where we aren't where we should be, right? We feel like we should be somewhere else, and we put ourselves that like this is who I am because of the things I've done, and that you
Yep.
are just stuck there, right? And I loved how you shared that that's not the case, right? Things happen, and that's just you just chose the wrong path at that time, and but you're supposed to be over here, so let's
Yeah.
shift you and move you over there, right? Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, I don't remember everything you just shared, but I mean, like, whoever's watching, listen, like, you have to go back, right, and just listen to all this. Kylie, you just dumped a whole bunch of great stuff on there. Um, I would love for you to just share, yeah, how people can connect with you, get to learn more about you, and your services that you can help other people.
Yeah, so you can find me on all the socials, Kylie, Kyle. Thanks, Mum. Leota, Leota. My business is called Elements for Success, and that came about from one of the OGs of personal development was a guy called Earl Nightingale, and I had a really negative association. Speaking of identity, I had a really negative association with the word success because I had this vision in my head that success meant mansions and cars and all of these kind of things. And I'm like, my gosh, that is so far out of my reach. I can't even conceptualize, that being the thing. And then Earl Nightingale had this quote that said, Success is the progressive realization of a worthy goal or ideal." And I'm like, Oh my gosh, I can be successful. I can do that. I can do a progressive realization of a worthy goal or ideal. And the elements are what you need, John, to progress your worthy goal or ideal might be different elements that I need, right? And so, being able to have grace and go, well, this is my journey. I'm on this progressive realization of my worthy goal or ideal. I can also choose a new goal or ideal if this no is one is no longer serving me and continue to do that so everyone can create success. And what success looks like for you, what success looks like for me might look different, but we still can be on this progressive realization of this worthy goal. And so elementsforsuccess.com.au, or you can find me on socials, elements number 4 success. And then Kylie Leota, I'd love to have a conversation with you. And I'd love people to share if there was one of those pillars that kind of resonated, because for the big visionary people, they might look at the infinite pillars as one big overarching thing and be able to take it all on board. Another person might go, right. So I've gone through infinite, and right now I need to work on my identity. Or actually, I've gone through this new journey, I've gone through this new job, or I'm looking for this new job. I actually need to look at my ecosystem. Right now, for the next 3 months or my next quarter, I need to actually revisit my ecosystem. Who are the people in my world that can support me on this next journey that I'm on? Or is it that I need to sit with those fears that maybe the reason things aren't moving is I haven't really kind of understood what's actually going on for me there. And I really need to sort of sit with that a little bit longer and work through why is that holding me back so much.
Mm,
So what I love about the infinite idea is you can pick one pillar, you can pick them all, you can do them in any order. I always encourage people to start with identity because I think that is a foundational piece to leverage from. But as you move through it, your identity is going to change. And, there's an African entrepreneur, Vusi Thembakweo, and he said, identity is man made, so thereby it can be man changed. So you are not the person that you were when you were the kid in school who was the class clown or the kid that, didn't pay attention or whatever. Your identity is man-made, so if you're not liking this identity, this version of yourself that you have right now, you have the power to change and you have the power to choose again and look at what that would look like, and working through those pillars can help you do that.
yeah, it's great. I think my allergies or something I can back it up. Um, yeah, again, you just dropped so many bombs. I don't know what to say here except for going back. But thank you for sharing how people can contact you and reach out to you. So I ask everybody one question at the end. What are 3 key things you've learned and used along your journey? And I know you have a whole bunch, but I'm curious to know what those 3 are.
So the 3 things for me were the fact that, um, I think having a really strong reflective practice without judgment. So
Mm,
for me, that infinite journey is I look at that and go, "What's working well? How can I do more? What's not working? What do I need to change, reduce, or eliminate?" So having a really strong reflective practice, and I'm not sure we're really taught how to do that. So that's part of, something that's been really powerful for me. The power to choose again. If I don't like my circumstances, I actually can choose again. I can, and actually, if I don't like my identity, I can choose again. If I don't like my circumstances, I think we give away our power so often we forget that we've got choices
mm,
in that scenario. So, strong reflective practice, reminding myself that I actually do have choices. So, when I'm feeling powerless over a situation, is going back and saying, well, what can I choose right now? And some days it might be, I'm going to choose to have another coffee. That might be, but I could choose that. I can choose whether I get out of bed or not. I can choose whether I have a shower or not. I can choose whether I put makeup on or they're all choices that I have. So when we're feeling powerless, going back to the fact that there are some choices that we can make and remind ourselves to walk in our own power. And I think the other part of it too is just reminding myself that I am the author of my own story, not the character in somebody else's. And that as the author, I get to rewrite the script. So if I need to start a new chapter, I can open up a new page and I can start again.
nice. I love it. Thank you for sharing everything you shared today, Kylie. It was great to have you on. I'm glad we made this happen.
Me
Again,
too. Thank you so much for
again,
having
go
me.
back and listen to this, and watch it again and take some notes. Thanks, Kylie.
Thanks, John.